Foggy Bottom Line Media. Hello again, everybody. This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media with another episode of Two Crusty Old Combat Soldiers with a Microphone. I'm joined once again by my co-host, Scott Konopasek. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Well,
Thanks for jumping on. And we're recording on Monday morning this time, and we're going to get this out before Thursday, mostly because we feel a need to say something about the attack on Iran that started on Saturday morning as soon as we can. We didn't jump on Sunday or to do this. Wanted to let things develop just a little bit. But Scott and I both have a lot of knowledge about the area. We're both military people, of course. Scott, I think you were an interrogator, and one of your sort of sources of areas of expertise is the Middle East. You served in the first Gulf War there, so we do bring some perspective here that is not your layperson necessarily. And we'd like to share some of our thoughts on this from a couple of different perspectives. Before we get started on that, though, I want to once again ask that you subscribe. If you enjoy this content, hit the like button, hit that little bell so you'll get notifications, and help us continue this work. We're doing the best we can to help folks understand what's going on around us, fight some of this misinformation and disinformation, and bring you some a fact-based, reality-based perspective based on our long experience in the military and in the corporate world, in elections, like Scott did, so that we can counter some of this stuff and help people who are concerned that the big media, the NBCs and the CBSs and the Fox Newses, may not be giving you the whole story because the corporation doesn't necessarily want you to have the whole story. And folks, I'm going to let Scott talk here in a second, but because I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist here a little bit today. And Scott, I'm hoping you can sort of keep at least one of my feet on the ground.
I'll do my best.
What do you think about all this?
Oh, man. I woke up on Saturday morning to news that totally blew me away, that we had attacked Iran. I guess on going back to my military experience, we had some good OPSEC, some good operational security, because it was hard to see this coming with the speed that it did.
Yeah.
But that in and of itself also created, I think, some really maybe fatal problems with the whole adventure here. But every time we reinvade someplace in the Middle East, I get kind of flashbacks to my experience there during Desert Storm and earlier, and Bright Star, other operations in that region. How we keep kind of replaying the same kind of things over and over again. Early in my career, I was involved in developing war plans for the invasion of Iran. And I'm very familiar with some of the assumptions we're making in the early mid-'80s about doing that. Of course, the political environment internationally, the international system, was still kind of this bipolar containment, balance of power model, which we don't have anymore. But there are some fairly solid assumptions that were made about the risks and benefits of invading Iran at that point in time that appear to have been totally ignored or brushed under the rug. And I think that same kind of thing has happened with this invasion. When we look at the political aspects, all the political lessons learned that we've had about going to war since World War II, or even in the 21st century, 20th century, appear to be thrown out the window. A lot of military maxims and military tactical strategic principles that we've always deferred to or planned around or incorporated in seem to have been completely ignored as well. And most telling to me, and I'll kind of wrap up my comments with this,
Opening
is
monologue.
yeah, the the name of the operation was Epic Fury, or Epic Donald Trump Temper Tantrum. I think it's kind of telling. It telegraphs, really what the purpose was. Is Trump was pissed and he's lashing out, and this is how he's doing it. And there's lots of evidence, or there's absence of anything to disprove that is anything more than uh, uh, an a rash, impulsive decision to reach out and do this right now. And we
Well,
can talk a little bit more about why I say that as we go along.
well, let me just point out to viewers who don't have a military background and aren't steeped in national security politics the way Scott and I are. Um, the U.S. military, the Defense Department, has a war plan for a fight with just about anybody, right? They make these, they keep them on the shelf. I suspect the plan for invading Iran is updated more often than the one for invading Canada. But we have a war plan for a war with Canada. It exists. It probably
I
hasn't
bet you
been
that
updated
one's
since
more recently updated. No, I
yeah,
did.
maybe.
I think it's been updated in the last 12 months.
Yeah, it could be. I just want to make sure viewers know that this is not unusual, and I'd also like to make sure viewers understand what what is really happening here, because these kinds of things, and I want to touch on this before we get off into the politics of it, and even potentially the the actual combat part of it, is that um, this is a huge, huge, huge undertaking. A lot of people, when I talk to people about military activity, about military operations, they don't understand the scale of this stuff and the logistics train necessary to make it work. Okay. I mean, your fuel, water, food for all of these people. These aircraft, the three F-14s that were shot down, that's something like $50 million worth of equipment. And it's good that the pilots survived, right? But every missile, every explosion you see in Tehran cost the United States government $1 million ish.
Millions of dollars. Yeah.
After all is said and done, I mean, even the cheapest of these things. I was reading. Did you read that they used this Lucas drone for the first time? Low.
No.
It's a low unit cost suicide drone. It's basically a bomb, a flying bomb. Think really, really simple cruise missile without the same kind of guidance systems. But I suspect it has an AI system that lets it look for a target,
Right.
a specific target, right? And these things cost $35,000 a piece. So if you've dropped 30 of these things, you spent $1 million. Okay.
Right.
And we'll get into who benefits from all this in a minute. But it's certainly the defense contractors, the people who make these things, is certainly one group that benefits from it. But I wanted to make sure everyone understands that this stuff doing this kind of thing is very expensive. It's very complicated. It's very dangerous for the people who are there. And it just simply costs a lot of money in time and equipment and people potentially. Right. So think of this as a huge scale thing that's not done simply. And, Scott, I say that because you're hinting that you think, and I definitely agree with you, that at least part of the issue here is a Trump who is gradually sinking into dementia, right? He's always been a narcissist who was very transactional about everything and didn't care about anyone but himself. And if he gets a wild hair and decides, well, I'm just going to bomb him, screw it, then he can do that. And if the guardrails aren't there to stop him, tell me, you mentioned a press conference you watched this morning. I missed it. Sorry. But tell me about that press conference and what that said to you about the leadership around Trump, who should have been grabbing him by the scruff of the neck and saying, wait, hold on here. Let's think about this.
Right. Yeah, yeah. First of all, I would say I consider this to be the most careless and foolish thing Trump has ever done as president of the United States. And he's got a whole resume of stupid and foolish things that he's
That's a
done.
high bar.
But yeah, but this one tops the list. And this morning, Secretary Hegseth and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and a couple of other commanders held a press conference, giving an update on where we stood with the operation. And really, it was almost more of a political rally than it was a press conference providing facts and information. Um, it was really echoing Trump's talking points in the same style that we've come to expect out of both Trump and Hexbeth, which is this crowing peacock strutting around, talking trash, uh, dehumanizing and insulting uh, anyone who disagreed with them, or the targets in this case of all the Iranians and anyone who disagreed with them. And it's a terrible reflection of the amateurish, dumbed down leadership that Trump has surrounded himself with. The biggest qualification we've seen Trump have in all of his cabinet members and in his generals this year, or since he's been back in office, is loyalty. It's loyalty over competence, loyalty over integrity, loyalty over ethics and morals. Uh,
And this
and
is classic
we're
fascism too. I mean, this one of Umberto Eco's classic components of fascism,
right.
right?
So now we have this clown show running this off the cuff military operation uh, that's destabilizing potentially the entire world. Everyone is affected by this. The Chinese get their oil
Yeah.
through the Straits of Hormuz, as do others in Asia. The Soviet Union or Russia, gets their drones and a lot of their weapons and support from Iran. All this is being disrupted right now. The tourist areas in Dubai and Qatar uh, and all these places are being bombed. Airports are being bombed. Civilian infrastructure is being bombed in this region. We
Yeah.
expected them to lash out to Israel, but what kind of rookie would not expect uh, the Iranians to lash out regionally against American allies, not just American bases in these Gulf countries, but the infrastructure there as well.
And,
So
and
I'm
maybe,
afraid that we don't have competent leadership here.
well, you definitely don't have that. At least not at the very top. I think this may be a good time to step back and briefly outline exactly what has happened. On Saturday morning, Israel started with missile and air bombing attacks on Iran, and the U.S. joined soon after. These bombings have presumably were at least initially directed at anti-aircraft systems, right? Which you'd want to take out first,
Yeah, always
right?
the first target.
And then they would go for their, if it's a military operation, you want to go after their ability to strike back. So if you know where their airfields are, where their fighter planes are, their bombers if they have them, or their missile systems, because the Iranians depend on ballistic missiles. And think if you're a World War II person, think V2 rockets, because that's what they are. They're not intercontinental ballistic missiles. They can't get here, but they can strike in Israel. They could presumably strike some places in Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe. Haven't done that yet, but the initial strikes, the early strikes, apparently have killed the Ayatollah Khamenei, who is the spiritual leader and the de facto political leader of the Iranian state. So decapitating the state the same way he did in Venezuela may have been part of this plan. But as Scott just mentioned, the Iranians did not just sit there. they are using their own weapon systems and what ability they do have to strike back to go after both U.S. bases specifically. And I think 3 soldiers were killed in a strike on a base in Oman. Was it? Wasn't it Oman? And
Uh,
I think it was
Kuwait,
Oman. Kuwait. Well, Kuwait was the friendly fire incident that shot down 3 F-14s, which is interesting. We
which
probably won't dig
I
into
want to
that too
talk
much.
about Hexbus response to that.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
all right. And then real quick,
that,
but as Scott mentioned, they've also attacked civilian targets in these Gulf states that are allied with the U.S. And this is another conspiracy theory rabbit hole I don't really want to go down today, but it is interesting that there looks like there could be something of a religious component to this because the Iranians are Shia Arabs. The Arab states that they're attacking are Sunni Arabs. And then, of course, there's Israel and the U.S., the Jewish, the Zionists, and the Christians. So, but tell us about Hex's response to that, because this is what's happening, folks. We're in a war with Iran. We didn't need to be in a war with Iran. There's no threat to the United States. They did not directly attack us, at least not directly. So there was no real good reason to do that. We were in the middle of negotiating it, and I'll get back to that in just a minute. But tell us, Scott, about the Hex's response to the 3 F-14s.
yeah, so he was asked about that friendly fire incident. By the way, it appears that friendly fire took down 3 U.S. aircraft, and as you pointed out, the pilot survived, but the equipment was destroyed. And his response was, "Oh, shit happens. Oh, kind of unfortunate, but hey, yeah, that's the way it goes." And there was not like any
And that was
concern.
Trump's response when he talked about the 3 service members who died in that attack. And I'm pretty sure it was Oman, but Kuwait, one of the Gulf
Yeah,
states. It was at a U.S. base in the Gulf.
right.
And his response was, "Well, it happens, and I get to decide." And imagine you're the family member, you're the spouse of one of these pilots or one of these folks, one of these service members who got killed. You have a 4-year-old at home, right? They've been deployed there. They die, and your president says, "Well, no big deal. People die in
Yeah,
war, and I get to decide who does. I can
right.
take over the country if I want. I can kill anyone I want." That's basically what he said. And this is
Yeah,
demented, people. I mean, at
yeah,
least you have to pretend to give a shit, right?
yeah. Well, I think Trump has ruptured that moral trust that soldiers inherently have in their leadership. All those soldiers and sailors are there because they volunteered to be there, and they volunteered and are willing, and their families are willing to deal with sacrifice and danger and risk because they have faith and confidence in their leaders. They have a kind of
Right.
a symbiotic trust relationship that they will be used judiciously in a way to further the interests of the country, and their lives won't be cheaply expended.
Right.
And I think Trump's reputation or history of being a draft dodger himself, and by calling people who did serve in the military losers and suckers, and now he's being so flippant with the loss of American life and not just American lives, but the lives of civilians, Iranians and uh, Israelis. I think he's broken that moral bond of trust that the commander in chief needs to have with his forces to effectively lead them. And we were small unit leaders in the army, and we know that we had to earn the trust and confidence of those that we led. If we expected them to respond uh, uh, to our orders and direction at a time when their personal interests, their life, their safety might be in
Mm-hmm.
jeopardy, you don't
Mm-hmm.
just do that. You don't just run into battle because somebody
Right.
told you to. You run into battle with people whose trust and confidence has been earned. and now once again Trump has shown himself to be feckless uh, and faithless, and this time in how he's using and committing U.S. forces. We started to see some hints of this in Venezuela,
Hmm.
but I think definitely uh, Trump has shown his hand to those who he purports to lead as commander in chief.
Yeah, and I would expect. I think we may dig into the political side of this a little bit. MAGA is not happy. His MAGA base is not happy. One of the reasons they voted for him was that he promised to stop the forever wars. He promised peace, and they're not happy. They don't see this as America first,
Right,
and we'll get back to that in a minute, I hope. But in the meantime, um, what they need to believe this is America first is a good reason why he did this. And
right.
one of the big
And we don't know
contrasts
why.
between he doesn't even seem to know why, but he hasn't expressed anything. One of the when Bush invaded Iraq in 2004, they spent months making the case
Right,
that it was absolutely necessary to do this, and it wasn't. And they were exposed later as having fed us a line of Bravo Sierra, but this guy's not even feeding us the line. He
right.
had people negotiating. Now, another little, and we can talk about the history of this in brief, I think, because all of this really started. Our conflict with Iran really started in 1953 when the U.S. government and the British government sort of collaborated to overthrow the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, the Mossadegh, because Mossadegh in the parliament had decided that they were going to privatize the oil extraction industry in Iran, which would kill profits for BP and American oil companies, BP especially, British Petroleum, right? And they installed the Shah of Iran. Iran was an empire for its most of its history. They call it a Shah there, not a czar or a king. It's a Shah. Shah Reza Pahlavi was installed as the king, the emperor, right? And this is classic American intervention in other countries. We don't like your politics. You're too commie for us. You're too leftist for us. You're not capitalist enough for us. So we're going to put a right wing dictator in charge so we get what we want. That's what happened, right?
Right. So let's actually rewind a little bit to World War II. So the Shah had been in power for many years, and during World War II, he was a tool, a British and American tool to protect the petroleum supplies, oil supplies in the Middle East. The Brits heavily invested in the beginning of the century in oil production and followed by the U.S. And our foreign policy in the Middle East through World War II and later was focused on petroleum, uh,
Right.
accessing oil. So the Shah was kind of a puppet of the Allies during World War II and acted to protect uh, the oil and economic interests of the U.S. and Great Britain. Uh, that became challenged by this movement towards democracy that we started to see after World War II. Uh, and Mossadegh was elected and Iran was becoming was stepping onto a democratic path, uh,
Right.
which posed some immediate conflicts to the interests of Britain and the United States.
Yep.
Uh, so the Shah had been deposed by Mossadegh uh, uh, because in order for a country to progress towards democracy, you have to get rid of the monarchy. So the Shah was deposed, was in exile, and finally the Brits and the United States had enough. We have to restore Western control over the oil supplies. So Mossadegh was assassinated, and the Shah was reinstalled in 1953, as you pointed out. And the Shah continued to be our little puppet in the Middle East up until 1979. Uh,
Right.
uh, and
And and
the
and
history
I
takes
was
a
old enough.
real.
Well, and Scott, you and I are both old enough to remember when the Islamic Revolution under Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979 took over the U.S. Embassy, held the hostages, helped Reagan get elected, of all things, which turned out to be a bad pathway, and that's a whole nother podcast. But our conflict with Iran really started there in 53, and then in 79 when Khomeini took over. Khamenei was Khomeini's successor. They created theocracy, a theocratic state, okay, which has some pushback in Iran because in the 50s and even into the 60s under Pahlavi, the the Iranian state was becoming more cosmopolitan and more open, right? It wasn't a democracy under Pahlavi, but they sort of reduced their legal regime, their what you might call Sharia law of a type, a legal regime around what women could and couldn't do, around the way people could dress, around whether it was okay for men and women to swim in the same swimming pool, kind of thing, right? Requirements that everyone go to the mosque and worship at a certain time, like it or not. And this caused a backlash that brought Ayatollah Khomeini into power, and Khamenei is basically his successor. So this has continued, and all of this you could argue is a direct result of U.S. imperialism, and this just looks like more U.S. imperialism. So one of the things you're seeing, and if I don't know where you want to go next with this, but the politics of this, like I just mentioned, are really not good for Trump. I think it's going to kill recruitment because of the thing you talked about, and getting the trust of your people. And folks, this is a general leadership and management concept here, right? Little quick leadership and management class for you guys. If you want your people to trust you, especially if you're doing something dangerous, you better by God make them believe you're the expert and you know what you're trying to do. This is why young lieutenants listen to the sergeant first class who runs the platoon, because they're learning too. And the sergeant first class who's not an expert in how to run a tank company or tank platoon is not going to have the trust of his people. And this works in business too. You need to know what you're talking about if you want people to do what you want them with, what the right thing, and follow your instructions. And this is going to kill recruitment, right? This is just going to kill recruitment because even the conservative young people don't think this is a good idea, right? Thoughts on any of that, Scott?
Yeah. Well, we could go on for a long time about lessons in leadership and how Trump and Hexbeth
Yeah.
and a lot of the current cabinet are the antithesis of effective leadership. Uh, but we talked a little bit about petroleum and it being sort of in oil being the focus of Western foreign policy towards the Middle East for forever, and it has continued to be. But what's really ironic here in this case, and I think it gives more weight to my argument that this was a poorly thought out attack by Trump, is it appears that we totally forgot that Iran controls the Straits of Hormuz, that Iran controls the flow of oil, not just Iranian oil, but Saudi oil, the Emirates oil, Iraqi oil, all goes out into the world through the Straits of Hormuz,
Right.
which is a very
Right.
narrow waterway that's controlled by Iran. And now they've closed it down and they've been sinking ships, attacking tankers that are trying to get through, totally disrupting the oil supply and international trade. And it's kind of like, guys, of course they're going to do that. And we act surprised. And it doesn't appear that we've taken any protective measures or countermeasures in advance to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Right.
Didn't happen, but
I think that's an
it has happened.
underappreciated point. Yeah, that's an underappreciated point. Was that it looks like they did this in such a big rush that they didn't think about. I mean, one of the things you want to do when you're in a combat situation, if you're fighting someone, and this is honestly true if it's a one-on-one bar fight, or if it's a tank platoon, or if it's bombing another country or trying to take over another country, decapitate it. You have to think a little bit at least about what the other guy can do to you.
Right.
Right. And
and as an intel guy, that was my job.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we one of the big Murphy's laws of combat we all joke about is how the operations plan never survives contact with the enemy, because as soon as the enemy shows up, your plan for I'm going to be at this place at a certain time is gone. Right, depending on
all
what
your
they do to you.
assumptions and everything. Yeah,
right. Now you're on the fly, and honestly, this is what makes the U.S. military better than some others, is because they push those decisions down as far as possible. Sometimes even to non-commissioned officers, which means people on the battlefield can make quick calls without getting beat up for it. Right, but this looks like it was just a mess from the start. It looks like there was no real thought put into it. We were in the middle of negotiations, and one of the things Trump said was all they had to do was say we won't make a nuclear bomb. Then they said that, and he attacked anyway. So this is, and I got to go on record, folks. I got to go on record as saying that this is completely unnecessary. There was no universe where it was necessary to do this at this time. It's not in the U.S. national interest, right? It's an expensive way for Trump to flex his muscle. It's not going to have a good outcome for the U.S. It's not going to have a good outcome for Israel. And it's not going to help anyone, anywhere, have a better life. It just isn't. Except maybe some Iranians, if they end up figuring out a way to change their government. But don't you think we could do that with some more, under the table help than by dropping bombs on their cities?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more miscalculations that I think have been made here. Trump, when he announced the attack, basically said to the Iranian people, "Hey, we're doing this for you. This is your chance to take back your government. We're not going to do it for you, but hey, we're setting the table for you. All you got to do is go take it." But that whole notion is so naive,
right?
To think that that even the majority of Iranians wanted to get involved in being part of regime change. It's kind of like once the Ayatollah was dead and some of the senior leadership, that nobody else would do anything, that none of the security apparatus, none of the military apparatus would continue to work, that there were no other people to step up and to coordinate and initiate countermeasures and responses. But that turned out not to be a very good assumption, because within 12 hours, they had reconstituted and started giving orders and counterattacking and responding, retaliating to the attack. And the domestic security services, the same ones that killed 7,000 protesters last month in Iran, they're still there.
Yeah.
Okay? And there's a large faction of the population that are still supportive of the regime,
right,
and the whole idea of an Islamic State. Just like we know here in the United States, there's always 30% of the American population that's going to support Trump, regardless what he does.
Yep.
There's a very large segment of the Iranian population, maybe even a majority, that are going to support the regime and the clerics and their religious leaders, regardless what they do. and they're not going to voluntarily give it up. And it's like we assumed that all the Iranians were like the young people who had been recently protesting,
Hmm.
uh, that they were going to go in and take things over. First of all, there's not that many of them. Second of all, they don't have an experience. They're not in positions of power to be able to do anything like that. And the people that do have the power are still in power, and now they're responding. So uh, the promise of to the Iranians that we're going to help them have a regime change is really stupid and naive and hollow when you take a look at it. Now we're trying to backpedal from the
Yeah.
whole purpose of regime change as the purpose and one of the goals, because they're starting to see what a incomplete set of assumptions, inaccurate set of assumptions, uh,
Right.
led us to do this.
Well, I mean, if you think back, let's circle back a little bit and talk a little bit about the why here. If you think about some of the reasons we would want to do this, whether it's outspoken out loud by the Trump administration or not, regime change would be one of those, right? And because they failed to really think it through and understand that bombing your way to regime change doesn't work. We changed the regimes in East Germany and Poland more by being a good example for them and letting them watch Dallas and Dynasty on TV, right? Because you can't block a TV signal. But Trump's ended all that. He's ended, the radio free Europe and America and all that. He's ended all that stuff. Okay, so they're not getting that pro democracy, pro capitalism message anymore. The second reason you want to do this would be to interrupt some capability that the Iranians have, right? Well, one of those might be the ability to shoot ballistic missiles at Tel Aviv, okay, or Israel more generally, okay? You might want to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, which they had agreed not to do in 2015, and actually created an agreement, the joint a joint agreement with European states, with the U.S. and with Iran about their nuclear programs that promise not to build a bomb, but would allow limited use for energy production. Right? Trump ripped that up because he thought he could get a better deal. So if Trump hadn't ripped up that thing, that document, that agreement, we wouldn't
Back
be
in
here today.
2017.
Back
Yeah.
in
And he did that
2017,
back in
right?
2017.
So, and then I mean, I can't think of another reason. Honestly, Iran is not a good actor in the world. They have supported, they've funded the Houthis, which have attacked some ships in the strait there, and the Strait of Hormuz. They have funded Hamas and their
Yeah.
terrorism in Israel, and
Hezbollah.
something needs to be done about that. But I'm not sure this was the best way to handle those things. And honestly, Iran has some grievances of their own that go back, like we said, to the 50s, when no blood for oil is not an uncommon thing. And oh, by the way, folks, if you're looking at your stock portfolio right now, it's not a pretty sight,
Right.
right? Oil prices are going to go up. You remember stagflation back in the 70s,
Yeah.
Scott? You remember
It
that?
was created by the disruption of the oil supplies from this region of the world. Exactly.
So if you voted for Donald Trump, if you are watching this and you voted for Donald Trump because the price of eggs was too high and because of forever wars that you wanted to stop, you're entering the find out phase
Right.
of voting for Donald Trump, right?
Hey,
So
Stan, I think it's really important that we just take a second here, lest we be accused of being Khomeini lovers and supporters of the Iranian regime, to point out that we're no fans of the Islamic Republic of Iran, nor of its leaders, nor of its
no,
actions, nor of its policies. And our heart is not broken on a personal level that the Ayatollah and senior leadership has been disposed of. However, there are consequences to what we did. And we're concerned about how prepared we are, how much we anticipated what those consequences would be. And I think, as you pointed out, we're in the find out phase
Yeah.
about the consequences, not of electing Donald Trump, but of the consequences of this attack specifically. Um,
Uh,
and
Scott, folks, if you're watching this, one thing you might know about us personally is that we are not. Scott and I don't both agree on everything, right? But we're not this one, monolith of thinking and perspective and all that. We actually we have some general things we agree on, but there's some things we disagree on. One of those things is religion. Scott has far more faith in the existence of God than I do. And so when you start talking about theocratic governments, you raise the hair on the back of my head. And the Khomeini government, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is one of the worst theocratic governments in the world. Okay, one of the worst in the world. It's worse than some of the others in Saudi Arabia and Oman and Dubai and these other Arab countries that have a lot of theocratically based restrictions on people's personal lives. I'm no more a fan of Christian nationalists in the U.S., right, who want to push a similar version of life on us here based on their interpretation of the Bible. So you're right. It's very important, Scott, that we make sure the problem we have with this attack on Iran is not that it killed Ayatollah Khamenei. Good for us on that one. Okay? Bad person, needed to go. He's not the only one in the world who's a bad person and needs to go. What I take issue with, though, is a couple of things. One is just the way we did it. Right? We did it in a way that was, it's like hitting a spider with an anvil, because it's just not necessary to spend all this money and kill all these people to make this happen, when we could have done it by isolating the regime, by funding some sort of pushback inside the country, by helping groups that wanted to end that regime from inside the house. Okay, but even more important is, I wonder, who the hell do we think we are that we get to decide this? Right? That Donald Trump is the person who gets to decide this. And Scott, it's not going to be the people who are going to come after us for appearing to be okay with Iran surviving and Khomeini and looking like Khomeini lovers. The ones that are going to come after us are the people that are going to accuse us of anti-Semitism. And folks, the war in this day and age is so expensive and so destructive that we have to find better ways to fix these kinds of problems, unless we're directly threatened ourselves somehow. If Iran's lobbing ballistic missiles into Virginia, show me the keys to my tank. Right? So, I don't know. You might disagree with a lot of that, but
I'm totally on board with that. But one of the things about our discussion today that kind of surprises me is we haven't even talked about the lack of a legal basis or authority under the Constitution for Trump to be out doing this stuff. I can remember when, probably even just a few months back, that was really important, abiding by the Constitution and holding the executive accountable and Congress stepping up and doing their role and having this robust debate. But it's kind of like Trump's just worn us out. We don't even bring that argument up anymore. It's just
and
a given. He doesn't give a shit about the Constitution. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. And the
and
Republicans in Congress are fine with that too.
yeah,
So we're
and
not
some
talking about
Democrats.
the War Powers Act. We're not talking about Congress vetting the whole idea or making a case like you pointed out before, or Trump actually having the authority to do this. It's kind of like we just gave up on that because he's just worn us down, and I'm really afraid that we have become, not you and I, but our society and our leaders have just given up on the hope that we're going to return to the rule of law, and that we're going to do things the way that they've always been done. They're supposed to be done, to go back to the norms, to go back to respect of the law, to respect of other elected leaders, respect for institutions. And we haven't even talked about that. And you're not really hearing it in the news coverage of this. Occasionally a story about our senators from Virginia,
Yeah.
specifically wanting to have a vote in the Senate about the war powers. But it's really become just subtext, if it's even brought up at all. And it just seems ironic that you and I got sucked into that in our discussion about this today. We didn't start with, it's illegal, he can't do this.
Yeah, right. And honestly, I think the idea that it's illegal is sort of contestable. I think it's illegal, and I think it is damn sure interesting that
But
we
we're not even having a conversation about it.
yeah, well, 50 minutes into this episode, and it's just now coming up. Another thing that hasn't come up yet that I thought might come up a little earlier is the whole wag the dog thing, right? Because nobody's talking about the Epstein files this week,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And I think that that's just kind of incidental. It is part of an overall strategy of creating as much chaos about everything, everywhere, all the time,
Yeah,
to distract from any of the issues. Epstein being sort of the big one right now, but Trump has a million of these issues swirling around him. His graft, his bribe taking, and by continually acting rashly and unpredictably, he's turned us into the cats that follow the laser dot on the wall when you wag it around.
Oh
And we
God.
forget, we lose
Oh,
track of what's going on and the way things should be and the way we want things to be, and we're just chasing that little laser dot on the wall.
well, I think it's a it's a subject for its own episode, certainly. And so this may be a way to segue into sort of winding this episode up. But it's I think you talked about returning to the rule of law, and I think one of the things we have to start thinking about now is what does that look like after Trump, after this fever breaks. And folks, I see a lot of signs that the MAGA fever is starting to break, and Trump is doing that himself. He's doing that through his immigration policy, which had a lot of support and was a key reason he won the election last year. But the way he's doing it and the people he's targeting is not working for his base. His base didn't necessarily want to deport the grandma who's been here 35 years and runs the best taco place in town, right? In the little town in Oklahoma. They wanted the MS-13 gangs gone. But it's interesting that ICE isn't going after those guys, and maybe that's because they're just too dangerous and they don't
Right.
want to fight them. But they're going after that grandma. Okay, that's one thing, the immigration thing. All right, the whole war and peace thing. Okay, he promised them peace. We'll get out of Afghanistan and no more forever wars. We're not going to try to fix other countries. America first. We're not going to spend your taxpayer money to bomb another country. We're pulling back from that stuff. He promised them what they heard was isolationism. And neither one of us thinks that's a good idea, but they did, and they're not getting it, right? The third thing is that there's a huge schism on the MAGA right in that coalition with respect to support for Israel. And honestly, Scott, one of the reasons, have you had a chance to see the 2024 sort of election autopsy that the Democrats did?
No, I think it would be very credible to me for them
Well,
to
it's
do
been held very close to the vest, but I did read one aspect of it. One thing they seem to believe is true is that they lost a lot of youth support. They lost a lot of support from young people on the liberal side because of Biden's continued support for Israel,
right.
Especially after the October 7th Hamas attacks and the genocide, and I'm going to call it that, it's genocide in Gaza that Israel is committing, okay? The young people on the MAGA side are no happier with that than young people on the liberal side were, okay? And if you look at right-wing social media and right-wing podcasts and writing and essays and reports and all that, you're seeing this schism happen, right, between Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes. So support for Donald Trump is crumbling. The question, and Scott, I'll ask you to think about this for next time or for a future podcast. What I think this is a golden opportunity for Americans, especially Americans on the left, to reconstitute things after this fever breaks and make some key changes that make it, if not impossible, then far more difficult for a fascist movement to take power. And I'll just give you one example, and that is set the conditions in the judiciary so that one faction, right or left, can't capture the judiciary in a way the right has captured the Supreme Court now, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of ways to do
agree.
that. Yeah, but there's a lot of ways to do that. But I think these are the kinds of things we need to start thinking about now. Any thoughts on that? Maybe to wind things down a little bit.
I think we definitely need to start talking about bulletproofing democracy and bulletproofing our institutions, and strengthening them, bolstering them, so that they're not as vulnerable as they've shown themselves to be to the political winds. I can remember in 2017 when Trump first took office, I was very confident in the strength of our institutions and the integrity of our leaders, regardless of what political party or philosophical bent. But we've seen that erode over the last 9 years to the point that their continued survival is uncertain. And I think that we shouldn't wait until there's no longer Trump. We need to be talking about right now how to bulletproof our institutions, our processes, our laws from being usurped by authoritarians, by fascists. The challenge is going to be to do it in a way that Trump adherents aren't going to accuse the left or those trying to restore or bulletproof democracy of doing the same authoritarian type things that they are guilty of doing. Lawfare was a phrase coined by the conservatives during the Biden administration, weaponizing the Department of Justice, and it was all specious. There was no evidence. It was just accusations. But now they've shown us what that looks like because they're actually doing it. And their pattern is to accuse others of doing what they would do, that projection. And so doing reforming and bulletproofing our institutions is going to be challenging because those who are not in favor of doing it are going to uh, do everything they can to mischaracterize the efforts as
Right.
authoritarian
Yep.
to do that, and
Well,
calling into question the whole motivation and the whole set of goals. But yeah,
right.
I think this is a worthy discussion for us to have going forward. I don't have any immediate ideas other than agreeing with you that it's something we need to start doing and maybe not waiting until Trump is gone.
No, we have to think about that. I've got some thoughts that we'll share in a future episode. I think that you know those social media posts that ask you, if you could have a beer with anyone, living or dead, right now, who would you want to have a beer with? If you ask me that question right now, I'd say I want to have sit down and have a beer with Mark Milley, because I'd love to know what General Milley would say about this and what he would have done, because you know the an important check on the president is the military establishment saying we're not going to do that, right? We're just not going to do that.
Right.
And folks, if you think this has never happened in U.S. history, you're wrong, because it has. And I've experienced it. I think that we really need to start thinking about this. Scott and I are going to talk about it, but we've got to start figuring out what we want things to look like after Trump. We can't wait till after Trump to start talking about it, but we need to start having that conversation, because what we don't want to do is end up in a sort of managed authoritarianism where whichever side is running the government can behave like an authoritarian, can do the kinds of things Trump has done,
Right.
right? I don't want that from uh, Gavin Newsom any more than I want it from Donald Trump, right?
Right.
Because either one of those is an infringement on my freedom that I'm going to fight, and I'm going to fight it hard, because I swore that
Right.
oath 40 years ago. Now, I will say real quick, and then we can sort of close things out here. I will say real quick that if Democrats were using the government and the Justice Department and lawfare the way Republicans are starting to do it, Rush Limbaugh would have died in jail. Donald Trump would still be in jail, right? Elon Musk would be in jail. Most of these billionaires would be broke and or in jail, right? Because every one of these people has almost certainly, and I say allegedly, almost certainly, have committed some kind of crime, whether it's pedophilia, whether it's prostitution, whether it's financial, uh, financial records, faking financial records, right? Enron was intentional, and it's not as uncommon as you think it is. The whole 2007 market crash. I mean, hell, half of Wall Street should have gone to jail over that.
Right.
So if Democrats really wanted to use those powers the way Trump wants to use them, there's a lot of people would be in jail, and we'd be looking at a very different society right now. It wouldn't be any more free, but it would be a lot less fascist in
Right.
the classical fascist sense. So anyway, I guess we should wind down. We're running up on an hour now. So Scott, final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts are with the innocent victims of
Yeah.
the violence, the war, the bombings that are going on, and they're especially with our brothers and sisters in arms
Yeah.
who are putting their lives on the line, and their families that are bearing up under fear and uncertainty about the well-being of their loved ones.
Right.
There's a human cost to all of this uh, that is easy to ignore, uh, especially when you're focused on the economics or
Yeah.
on the villainization of folks. But let's don't forget the individuals who are bearing the brunt, bearing the cost, bearing the burden of this misadventure. Keep them in your prayers if that's what you do. Keep them in your
Right.
thoughts. Uh, Keep them in your meditations. But let's don't lose track of the human aspect, the human suffering that's been triggered by these rash decisions.
A lot of people are dying right now. People are dying. Innocent people who woke up this morning, wanted to go to work, wanted to go have a cup of coffee, wanted to take their children to the playground. A girls' school was bombed in Tehran. 53 elementary school girls died. I understand that was kind of a friendly fire incident. It was an Iranian missile that actually did that, but that missile doesn't get fired if we don't attack them. And innocent people are dying all over the Middle East right now, who have no stake in this, don't want it, didn't want to see it. And one of the things about being a combat leader, which unfortunately Donald Trump is a combat leader, is you have to do everything you can to minimize the loss of life and complete your mission with minimal loss of life, minimal collateral damage. Only shoot the guy that needs to be shot because he's shooting at you. That's the hardest part about being a combat soldier. And it's not just about bringing your own troops home, although that's also a big deal. We have to think about this in a holistic way because there's a lot of money being spent to kill innocent people, and there's no clear understanding of why or what we hope to get from this.
Right.
And,
What the
and
purpose
that's
is.
a problem, right? So, Scott, thanks for joining me. I think we may have rambled a little bit on this one, but this is a tough one. And folks, we're going to come back to this. This is going to call for some more conversation, both from the military side, from the why are we doing this side, from even some maybe further out in left field theories about what's going on here, wag the dog type stuff, but also about what comes next. We got 3 more years of Trump if he lives that long. And I don't know. I mean, another thing we didn't talk about, what about the Iranian sleeper cells that, we can expect terrorist attacks in the U.S. now?
Right. Well, there was an attack Saturday night in
Yeah.
Austin
Yeah. So
that bears the fingerprints of being
Yeah.
inspired by this. So
this is how countries and groups of people who don't have a country, the Kurds, for an example here, this is how they fight. It's asymmetric warfare. They don't have 10,000 tanks to send at us. They don't have 10,000 airplanes to send at us. They can't bomb us. They don't have nuclear weapons. So they use terrorism. So we got to get ready for that too. And it's another one of those things that it looks like the Trump administration just didn't even think about.
didn't even think about it.
No preparation for it at all. So, All right, folks, this is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media. Another episode of Two Crusty Old Combat Soldiers with a Microphone is in the can. It's Monday morning. You should see this on Tuesday afternoon. We're going to accelerate the schedule a little bit. More to come on this. And as always, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell so you get notifications. Go check us out on other social media. We're on X, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. We're starting to get some views on some of these other platforms. The shorts are getting views up into the thousands now. So the best way to support our work is subscribe on the YouTube channel, go to the Patreon page, and let us know what you think. Comment, share, like, help us out with this. We want to keep doing this. We're going to keep doing this. It's important. And if you support us, we can give you even better content and more content. So we appreciate you're looking in, appreciate your tuning in, and we hope you have a good first week of March. Scott, appreciate you joining me, sir. Thanks.
Beware of the Ides of March.
Beware the Ides of March. Yeah, they're coming up fast, aren't they? That's a good one. I forgot about that one. So, Scott, appreciate your help, sir. Thanks so much for everything. Appreciate you.
My honor.
Carry on, everyone. This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media. and we are out here. Thank you.